In the early hours of August 6, 1945, telegraph operators inside Japan's Imperial General Headquarters received a coded alert unlike any before. A major city, Hiroshima, had lost all communication. Reports were incomplete, scattered, impossible to believe. A single aircraft had flown through Japan's defenses, dropped a bomb unlike anything ever seen, and vanished. At first, the high command assumed the exaggeration of frightened survivors. But as reconnaissance pilots returned, their eyes hollow, their voices shaking, a terrifying truth began to take shape. The city did not exist anymore. Concrete had melted. People had turned to shadows burned into walls. Hiroshima had been erased in a single blast. Japan's leaders realized this was not a new weapon. It was a new age of war. Yet the nightmare was only beginning. Inside Tokyo's underground war rooms, admirals and generals argued desperately. Many still clung to the belief that Japan's spirit would prevail. They insisted the Americans were exhausted, losing will, and could be forced into negotiation if Japan inflicted enough casualties. Courage can defeat machines, some said, but new intelligence shattered those illusions. American factories had reached a scale unimaginable to Japanese planners. The United States had already built more than 120 aircraft carriers, while Japan struggled to keep a dozen operational. Admiral Toyota stared silently as production charts were placed before him. His voice finally broke the silence. "We have not been fighting the real America." The room felt colder, as they understood this was no exaggeration. America had reserved its real strength for Germany. In the Pacific, they had only committed a fraction of their power, and even that fraction had pushed Japan to collapse. Then came August 9. Another flash, another city, Nagasaki, gone. Survivors described a second sun ripping the earth open. Radio intercepts confirmed the Americans could produce these bombs rapidly. Panic hit even the most loyal officers. The belief that Japan could force honorable peace was now replaced by a paralyzing question. How many cities would be destroyed before nothing remained of Japan at all? And then, news that crushed whatever resolve was left. The Soviet Union, once a fragile neutrality, had declared war and invaded Manchuria with overwhelming force. Japan's entire northern defense strategy vanished in a moment. The Imperial Army's best divisions were already dead in the Pacific or trapped in China. Now a second superpower was closing in. General Enemy, once the strongest voice of resistance, could no longer deny reality. America had air supremacy, sea supremacy, and now atomic supremacy. Japan stood alone. Inside the Emperor's bunker, the Supreme War Council gathered for the most painful meeting in Japanese history. Intelligence officers presented the final report. American shipyards were capable of building one new aircraft carrier every 5 days if they wished. They could produce thousands of bomber aircraft a month, more than Japan's entire 1945 industrial output. A quiet horror filled the room as they realized that for 4 years, they had been fighting a restrained opponent. The Americans had not been using their full power. They had been holding back. The belief that Japan's spiritual power could overcome American steel was not just false, it was delusion. One admiral whispered, "We misjudged an entire civilization." Pride cracked, dreams turned to dust. General Enemy rose from his seat, his eyes filled with tears he refused to shed. He had argued for continued resistance only hours earlier, but now, looking directly at the Emperor, he spoke the words that marked the end of the Japanese Empire's ambitions. "Your Majesty, we must stop this war." Silence followed. Some were furious, some wept, but all understood. The choice was surrender or extermination. The Emperor decided Japan would accept the Allied terms. These commanders, once convinced that death was preferable to defeat, now faced the reality that their duty was not to sacrifice the nation, but to save what was left of it. As the meeting adjourned, General Enemy bowed deeply to the Emperor. He returned to his residence, wrote a brief message accepting responsibility for failure, and performed ritual suicide before dawn, a final act of loyalty to a dream that had already died. For decades, these conversations remained buried in classified archives. Today, we know the exact words spoken in those rooms, words that reflect the cost of overconfidence and the danger of ignoring truth. History teaches many lessons, but few are as brutally honest as this one. Power is not determined by passion alone. Industry, intelligence, and the ability to adapt win wars, not faith in myths. The Japanese High Command learned this too late, and the world still lives under the shadow of the weapons that forced that lesson upon them. The war began with fire over Pearl Harbor and ended with light brighter than the sun. But between those two moments lies as a story of pride, fear, and a final awakening to an enemy far stronger than anyone imagined. The day Japan understood American power was the day the war truly ended.